Well, hey everybody, and welcome to our Friday night live show. Let's just start out by welcoming Brian as usual, and then diving into the news. What interested you this week?
Well, there's a couple of pretty big ones. The first, I guess we could start talking about is the new Mercedes-AMG C63S E Performance.
Yes, very long
Big,
name.
big name, big. I guess controversy. I guess people knew it was coming, but uh, this is sort of confirmation that yes, the 63 level AMG cars are now going to be four-cylinder plug-in hybrids, at least in the C class, and it's putting out a lot of power. There's no questioning that. People are just upset about the purity of it all. There's no more V8. They just chopped it in half and made it a hybrid. It's more modern. It seems like a very complicated replacement for what used to be more of a simple, just shove a V8 in there and then shove a twin turbo V8 in there and all that. So I don't know. I mean, it seems to be very polarizing to a lot of people. And then you look at the styling of it. It doesn't look too different from a C43. It doesn't seem like they went as far to differentiate it this time around. That's the thing I've noticed the most. I don't have a problem with the new powertrain because, I'm sure they'll figure out a way to make it seem really epic, even though it isn't going to be under the skin all that people want it. But it's that look
I'm
to me
really
that's
intrigued
really
to see
important.
how it goes. Now, of course, this is all crystal balling, but do you think that they might have a different 63 for larger vehicles based off an inline six, or you think they're going to try and jam this puppy into an S class?
Right. I don't know
Just
because
crystal ball. What do you guess? Let's go
I
for a
don't. I
guess.
feel like for the S class, they probably have something else in mind. Because what
Yeah,
is it that's
we'll
in
find out.
the GT four door? Because that one's got the SE performance model, but I forget that's not a four
Yeah.
cylinder, is it?
The other thing that's interesting is people have been complaining about the weight. So Brad here has a question
Right.
about the weight. It's about 4,500 pounds, a little over there. I'm not overly disturbed by that actually. It's not a huge amount heavier than the twin turbo V8 was because the engine's a lot lighter, and what we don't know is where's the weight going to be located in the vehicle, up and down or front to back. I would not be surprised if the way that they've designed this ends up giving it a rear weight bias, which would actually be really fun. Cars that have a 45% weight bias up front, 55 in the rear, they tend to be really nimble feeling, and this has that possibility because the motor's in the back, there's a two-speed transfer case in the back, or two-speed transmission in the back, and then the battery, it's probably back there somewhere.
Yeah, so this is European spec, but if you watch
Hmm.
CarWow, Matt Watson interviewed one of the guys working on it, and he said it's a 50-50 perfect weight balance, at least for
Yeah,
their
I'm
car.
intrigued to see how it
Yeah.
ends up in the US. So a lot of details we don't know yet, but I'm really intrigued by that new system as well. Hopefully we'll be able to see it soon. Now, a lot of people are also upset about its plug-in hybrid range, which is going to be about 7 miles maybe in European
Yeah,
spec.
yeah,
It's probably going to be more like 5 by the time it's EPA rated.
yeah.
But the main thing to know is it's not meant to really be a plug-in hybrid. It's a
No, no.
performance vehicle. It has a big enough battery in order to make that performance happen. And then they figured, hey, because it has a battery, might as well give it a plug.
Right. Yeah, I think it's people who are going to get upset about that. You're focused on the wrong thing with this car. So
Hmm.
it's they did what they did. At least they gave you something. At least
Yeah.
you can drive it from home to the grocery store and back, and that's about it. But you know, I think it's
Yeah.
cool.
So what else in the news thought was
Yes.
interesting there?
So we finally have the name for the Volvo XC90 replacement
Yeah.
that's going EV. It's not going to be Embla, at least not the
Hmm.
version that we know about that they're talking about. It will be EX90.
And this actually makes a lot of sense to me. I really doubted that they were gonna give it a name like Embla because that just sounded
Yeah,
wrong.
yeah.
Very un-Volvo. Also, I'm intrigued by their choice of E before X because in English you're going to pronounce it X, and
Mhm.
if it didn't have an E, you'd pronounce it X. So it's actually the same name that it had before with a
Mhm.
silent letter, which is also somehow very Volvo.
Yeah. And I mean, now this could, I know, because there was some confusion because at first people were like, oh, there's going to be an EV version that looks a lot like the outgoing XC90, and that's not going to be the actual long-term replacement. That's going to be what the Embla is, but now we've got this news, so I'm
Yep.
guessing it's all the
This
same
is
thing.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
So
Volvo, like most of the European car companies, prefers design evolution, so I'm not really surprised somehow.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
And the car
yeah.
currently looks good. It's a good foundation to
Yeah,
work with.
looks good.
It's still,
So, I
yeah,
mean, it's probably probably in no way related to the XC90. It most likely is 100% different. But in typical European luxury car fashion, it's going to look a lot like the existing lineup.
right, right. Which again doesn't look bad already.
Yeah, yeah,
It
I'm
aged
kind of
it
okay
aged
with that
really
too.
well. Yeah. So yeah, and then I guess this is more not news, but more spy shots and things like that. The 2024 Prius has been
Mm-hmm,
caught this
mm-hmm.
week, and like last week was where these test mules with the production body have started being discovered by photographers, and
Let's see
people
here.
are now getting to see what it looks like under the camo, and it looks very sleek. It doesn't look like, I mean, you can tell it's a Prius, but it's also like the more swept back looking Prius.
Now,
There are
let
a
me
couple
Google
sites.
this because I've actually seen the production Prius.
We've both seen the production
Uh,
Prius. I don't know. Can I pull it up? I don't know if I'm not logged
uh,
in, so I can't pull it up. But if you
yeah,
go
let's
to,
see here. I'm going to go ahead and say that Burlap Car
yes, yeah,
is not far off,
yeah.
but not quite right.
Well, those pictures are the pictures. If you're looking at Burlap Car, yeah, those are the ones that are circulating around right now. And I mean, to
Mm-hmm.
me, from what I remember seeing, of course, we saw a dark vehicle when we saw it, and so the details were a little bit harder to take out. But the general shape of it looks pretty spot on. It's got the long, low
Mm-hmm.
hood that's very much a wedge
Yeah.
shape that goes that continuing line all the way up to the roof. The peak of the roof, at the tallest point of the roof, is pushed back further now, so it does have that more,
Yeah.
lean back look.
It's very Honda Insight meets Dodge Dart.
The like most recent Dodge
The
Dart.
most recent Dodge Dart. Yeah.
Okay,
There's definitely a little bit of dartiness in that profile.
I think it looks
Well,
pretty
with that
cool.
out of the way, let's dive on into some of the questions here. Here's a good one because I had a feeling that this would be one of the biggest, most controversial things about the Mustang. What do you think about the as this person puts it, the hideous Kia Hyundai looking interior?
Oh, don't do Kia Hyundai like that. Yeah, my only big problem. And I get a lot of people don't like that they've gone away from the traditional, I forget what the actual term for how they designed that, but where the dashboard
Hmm.
centers has a symmetrical look up on the hood, the top of the hood or the top of the dashboard, and has that split look to it. They've
Yeah.
gone away from that
Definitely away
entirely.
from that. And it's
Yeah,
all because of you, Brian, because supposedly the millennials and the zennials and the whatever else we're supposed to call the people even younger than them, apparently this is to appeal to you.
yes, and that's what, it does look cool. I'm a fan of that dual screen setup look, even though I don't know if you finally, because you said you saw it in person, but I didn't. But I did
Ah,
finally
that's
see a
right. You didn't
picture.
see it in person.
The
Yes, I did see it in
two,
person. I sat in it. I really liked the two screen layout. I never cared for the dual symmetrical bumpy thing that we had going on in the
yeah,
current Mustang, was just never a fan somehow. I think that in certain generations of Mustang, it worked better than this last generation. I really, really didn't like it in this last generation.
yeah.
Materials quality is significantly better all across the dashboard. One of the interior designers said they had to fight really hard for that actually because the initial prototypes did not have the soft touch sections in the middle. And that was a major late change. Apparently, was the
Yeah,
softer,
well,
squishier bits.
it's a good thing they did, because for me, yeah, like thinking about the price point, as you've pointed out before, it's like, okay, they can only go so far. The only part of it
Hmm.
that I felt looked, even from a distance, to be kind of cheap looking is the center binnacle with the air vents in it, where
Mm.
the sort of, I guess, the BMW style button row, which is all one button you push. It just detects where on the single piece you're pushing to determine which function you're hitting. All of
Think
that looked, it didn't look as good as the old toggle switches they had, the physical switches. That was a much cooler, more retro throwback, I guess, design element
let me
that
look
I
this
kind
up
of wish
because
they had kept.
I
I don't know.
think that button module actually does have its own buttons.
So it was one single thing that moved though. Because I
Uh,
remember pushing it and being like, there's not a separation between the physical like 5 or 6 buttons you hit in it. It's all going down in one hit. It just knows where your finger is, just like the
okay. It
BMWs.
might be. My memory's a
Yeah.
little bad on that one. I thought that looked fine. I was okay with that look. We have to preface this for all the folks out there that might be trying to give Ford a bad time. Remember that the current Mustang is less expensive than a BRZ or an FR86. It is a very, very inexpensive rear-wheel drive vehicle that also gives you 100 more horsepower, basically, than we find in the FRS and BRZ and Toyota 86, whatever we're supposed to call it, thing that's not an FRS anymore because Scion's dead. At any rate, way more power, less money, and I think actually a more comfortable suspension tune and a more usable back seat. So all that happens at that price point. We don't know what 2024 is going to be priced like, but I wouldn't be surprised if it stuck pretty close. This is probably going to be under $30,000 for decently over 300 horsepower, turbocharged engine, 10-speed automatic, rear-wheel drive, tons of specifications that are way beyond the competition. So with it framed in that way, it's like Veloster territory, really, pricing-wise.
Yeah, and I'm just happy that they kept the convertible, because I honestly didn't think they would, because no one's buying them, and I like that they're doing that, and that's an option, because I don't know why. I feel like one day I'm going to be a convertible person, but the time's not coming.
I mean, if you go to Hawaii and you rent a car, it's going to be a Mustang convertible. It's what you do.
Okay, well that's the plan. And these new ones they look. I mean, I like the new styling. It definitely is just a little bit bolder. Well, the outside, you can obviously, it's very much like the last gen, just a little bit beefier, a little bit tougher, sharper looking. And the convertible form, it looks really good too. So like, I wouldn't have a problem driving around one of those. So I like it.
Yeah. I think the big reason that it didn't ditch the convertible model is that it's not a complete redesign. Right. Obviously, it is very heavily based on the existing Mustang because there wasn't anything wrong with the Mustang's crash structures in terms of compliance. The wheelbase is identical, so a lot of the structure underneath the body panels is very, very similar. I would not be surprised if even things like seat frame internals are the same as the outgoing model. Certainly, the center tunnel is incredibly similar. Yeah. Some people are wondering, are they exactly the same part? It's hard to tell in the prototypes that we've seen, but it could well be. I mean, it could be that you could just pull this center tunnel out of this, pop it into an older model, etc. But I'm okay with that because it helped keep the costs low, and that is the big thing. We have an independent suspension Mustang with a body that handles coupe and convertible, and it sells in really low volume. Remember, and this is I think the other surprising thing really with Ford is that they bothered to give us another one. Because when you think about it, it undersells the Challenger, which is decades old, by a huge amount. Dodge sells more Challengers every year than Ford sells, generally speaking, with the Mustang. It's pretty close month to month. But there's no convertible Challenger. So Dodge is doing that with just coupe sales. And an estimated about 40% or so of Mustangs, depending on who you talk to, because Ford won't say for sure, but about 40% of the Mustangs are convertibles. So actual coupe sales is quite a bit below Dodge.
Yeah. And of course, as we've talked about, well, I don't know if we talked about on a live session, but now Dodge is going to allow you to, they're working with an actual customs body shop in Florida, and you can, from the factory, or I guess on your configurator, check the box to have them send your Challenger down there.
I would not do it somehow, because you're sending it to a body shop and they're cutting the top off of it. It's probably going to be a wet noodle.
Yeah.
And it's really expensive. Oh my God.
I don't even know.
It was almost $30,000 to have it done.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how much that would be normally, but
yeah. I mean, think about taking your $30,000 car, because a base Challenger is not terribly expensive.
No.
So take your base car that was made for $30,000 price point, whack the top off of it for $30,000. Now you got a $60,000 car with a $30,000 interior. I'm just guessing that the resale value on that is going to be super bad.
Yeah. At least the Challenger has the more up-to-date interior than the Charger did, because they both, like 2011, got the refresh, and the Challenger got that.
HT, we certainly do. We're looking at that right now.
Yeah, we're here.
But yeah, no, we'll get to you in a bit.
Yes. Also, whoever's wondering, yes, this is a Yamaha YPG 535 keyboard behind me, in case anybody was wondering.
But let's go to some of the questions here. So Peter's saying, aside from cost, any reasons to not add the air suspension to a Porsche Cayenne? I would say no. I love me some air suspensions. I would do it in the Porsche. I would do it in really most things where it's available. I guess if you don't, pardon me, I've dropped my pen here. If you don't care for the way an air suspension feels, then that would be one reason. But generally speaking, it's going to improve ride quality. It's not going to have a huge impact on handling. Generally, it's going to handle a little worse than a steel spring suspension, all things considered, because it's going to be a little bit heavier. But they're generally more adaptive, so I would do it.
Yeah. And I like them too. I mean, I wish more half-ton trucks had them other than
Mm-hmm.
the Ram 1500 because that thing rides so smoothly. So they work. They
Here
work.
is an excellent question that I think just deserves the best bad answer you can give. Just make one up.
Because they don't even know. They don't
Yeah,
even know.
unfortunately, that's probably also the
It
true
is.
answer.
Yeah, they don't know. When they show the car off,
Yeah,
they're so eager to get us to see it, they get ahead of themselves and they actually don't
yeah,
know how much it's going to cost yet. They don't know that sometimes until like the very last minute. I mean,
yeah. And here's how it usually goes down. Here's the longer answer. So the longer answer is most often when this happens, either the car company has decided they want to head off leaks, so they want to show the car real quick, so that then they can do more testing with the vehicle uncovered. So if it's a really hot vehicle and they don't want the launch to get screwed up, they will show us all the vehicle first, then all the photos are out there. They can control the narrative. Then they will then roll through all the usual testing that they would need to do before releasing a vehicle with the car out in the open, because they really dislike the whole crappy, spy shot thing.
Yeah.
The second thing that this generally applies to foreign car companies, so headquarters is Europe or Asia, etc. This situation usually is the headquarters hasn't decided what the price is, and there's politics involved. And this is usually what happens at Toyota, Honda, Hyundai, Kia, etc. Is that even right down to the wire, there's like this final wrangling over like, is it going to be $5 more expensive, and what options are we going to give or whatever. And that seems totally bonkers, but it happens all the time. And the weird result of it is that sometimes they will decide to pull options really, really late in this process, so late that cars have actually been shipped to the US already.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes I have driven cars, the K900 is one example of this, Kia's K900,
Right.
where they sent a whole boatload of cars to the US and they included paint colors that were not available in the US. They pulled them from the U.S. allotment at some point in time. So then they couldn't sell them because they couldn't warrant them. So they lived in the press fleet, and we all had to say, yes, we understand this is not a production color. And then they had to go to a crusher later in life, which is kind of sad.
Sam. Yeah, and the other crazy thing is I have a friend who works at a Florida Kia dealership, and I think Kia, and to some extent Hyundai, they're notorious for this, but he's already getting 2023 Kia Niros on his lot. And we have not driven it. They have not released pricing for it, but somehow people are able to buy it already. And it's not even updated on their website. You can't go on the website and look at the 2023 as a for sale car. It's still under the future cars thing. So it's like I don't know how they're doing that. I don't know how that works.
Yeah, that part is even more bizarre. So the pricing is available, so you can buy one, and that window sticker has a price tag on it.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, it's not on the public website until they've somehow decided that that's the time and date to do that.
Right.
So,
Like remember the 2020 the Cadenza, which they killed after less than a year of its refresh. That 2020 model was on sale for like, I kid you not, because I tracked. It was on sale for nearly a year before they actually put it on their website as being available.
Yeah, they didn't care about the Cadenza.
But they didn't care because
let's see here. Have we heard about the 2023 Ford Escape plug-in hybrid? We haven't heard any details just yet, but we know that the Escape is not really going to get much of a change. So Ford's plan, it seems like, with the Escape is similar to what they've been doing with the Edge. So reasonable amounts of time will go by before it will get an update. I'm going to guess it's probably going to get a refresh in 2025, but nothing substantive will change at that time.
There's supposed to be a refresh for 20. I don't know if it's 23 or 4, but that's been caught by spy photographers for a couple of weeks now. It's got that new front end that the shiny cars are getting. Yeah. I guess we're going to start getting that front end too.
Ford's refreshes are very delayed though.
Yeah. Oh, for us, yeah.
So we'll see, because of course the theory was that we would also be getting the new Explorer and for 2023, and we are not. So
and then I guess in terms of specifically the plug-in hybrid, if correct me if I'm wrong, it's the same thing as the Corsairs, right?
Yeah, pretty similar hybrid
Similar.
system. Yeah,
Well, it's
the
refreshed
problem there
and
is
changed
the
a lot.
the supply chain stuff. So this is his companion question here.
Right.
Battery supplies to manufacture all EVs on sale. We don't know. That is a huge question. We know that there are major battery manufacturing facilities going in the U.S. and they are truly huge. Let's put it this way. So GM and Ford have both announced that their factories will be up and running somewhere in the 2024 to 2025 year range,
Yeah.
and their annual megawatt hour and gigawatt hour capacity of those plants is greater than everything that Tesla has worldwide. So if they can achieve that, then theoretically, yes, there will be the amount of batteries required for GM's EV push, where they claim they're going to be selling hundreds of thousands of units of the Equinox and the Blazer EV, and
Hmm.
who knows how much of the rest of the lineup. But theoretically, yes. Ford has been keeping some of their plans a little closer to the chest, but again, they also have a large investment there. We don't know where the rest of the manufacturers are going to be sourcing their materials. We do know, however, that Kia is going to be moving EV6 production to the U.S. sooner than expected.
Okay. Um, is that the Georgia plant that they're
That
moving it
is the
to?
rumor, is that it will
Yeah.
be going to Georgia soon. So that is because, of course, the Korean. Well, everybody was caught off guard by
Yeah.
the changes to the $7,500 tax credit. So that proved to be a bit of a problem for foreign car companies that were really expecting to keep that credit going.
Yeah. 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 Like I've got the Kona EV right now, the Kona Electric, and the top of the line trim that I've got is $44,000. I mean, it's
Hmm.
without that tax credit, it's kind of a harder sell by a
Yeah.
good bit. It's a tiny little thing. Yeah.
I'm really going to be intrigued to see if GM can actually deliver on usable bulk volumes of the Equinox, because that really appears to be one of the first decent, affordable
Yeah.
EVs of the right size. Tesla has all but given up the $25,000 car, the $35,000 car. They've basically given up the $45,000 car. But GM claims that even with some of the accelerated cost inflation, that they should have an Equinox that is price comparable to a gasoline Equinox, right around $30,000 or so, somewhere within the first model year of production of the Equinox. It's not going to be right away, though.
Right. Because we're getting like the top of the line model
Yeah.
first, which is the
Yeah.
same with their other
Basically,
stuff.
they're going after a different model than Ford. At Ford, it seems like they're releasing base models and upper end trims simultaneously,
Hmm.
and GM is really targeting the higher rates. So, expensive Hummer EVs went first, expensive Lyrics went first, etc. Things like that. We'll see how that goes.
Right.
Yep. Um, let's see here. I have not heard anything about a hybrid Tahoe. Have you?
No, I actually haven't seen anything about the possibility. No, I don't think so.
GM is really running away from hybrids, to be
Yeah.
honest. So they seem to be pushing more towards full electrification, even though in a rational world, it would make more sense to move everything to a hybrid, then move everything to a plug-in hybrid, then move everything to a full EV. This
Yeah.
is this is absolutely not the way we're doing things.
No, no.
And part of it is really by customer demand. The bonkers thing is, as much as people would like to claim that EVs are being rammed down America's throat, the reality is demand is absolutely astronomical for EVs. Nobody can keep up. If you want to buy a new Tesla now, you're waiting until January or February of next year, most likely. I think even some of the models are off in April and March. And Ford won't even reopen order books for some of their EVs
Right,
because
right.
they just cannot build enough. So demand is definitely outstripping supply.
Yeah.
Um,
And I also think that the part of the issue is I think plug-in hybrids could sell a lot more than they do, but most people don't understand what they are and
yeah.
how they kind of fit there in the middle. They think they're just
Hmm.
regular hybrids, but I think for a lot of people they're actually right now, especially the smarter choice. But there's a
Yeah.
lot of miseducation and misinformation, I guess, misunderstanding about them too, which
Hmm.
is helping push people right into EVs and then creating this whole like, oh, I jumped too far, went too far ahead in the future with this technology, and I want to circle back because I'm not ready to do all that having an EV requires. And then, of course, then the infrastructure is in most cases not ready for
Right.
everybody to
Yeah,
use
it's
it.
an interesting problem. Like this was one of the topics we had talked about having on the show before. But for instance, the R1T and the Lightning are both going to have to get sold. I think that we've already arrived at the decision that neither EV truck rather, is going to hang on for any longer length of time here, because they're just too inefficient. The Rivian just sucks down power like there's no tomorrow when it's doing nothing. It's just sitting there in the parking lot. The Lightning is a really solid truck that happens to be an EV, but the efficiency is not great. And it just doesn't fit my life. I don't always have the power to charge it at home, being off the grid. So, I really would be better off with something like a plug-in hybrid truck, which doesn't exist at the moment. But
Right.
I think, let me know what you think about this. I have this feeling that America's distaste for plug-in hybrids, and actually really global distaste for plug-in hybrids, even though they are much more popular in Europe, I think it's a very puritanical view. It's sort of like harm reduction in social circles where they're talking about reducing the amount of drugs you use, or not smoking and taking up vaping instead, because this is harm reduction. It's going to cause you less cancer, still
Hmm.
cancer, but less cancer than the smoking. And plug-in hybrids are that same sort of thing. It's gasoline harm reduction mitigation, whatever you want to call it. You'll use
Right.
less gasoline, but you'll still be using gasoline. And there is a very vocal set of environmentalists that say, no, this is the wrong tack. You need to go cold turkey. You need to stop it. And so I think that once you've decided, hey, this gasoline thing is bad, I want to do the EV thing, you want to completely skip the middle ground. Nobody here is interested in this harm reduction theory.
Yeah, that makes sense. And also, as you've said before, like I guess in America, like in the US, in terms of trying to get people to quit things, we're more of a rip it off like a band-aid type of
Mm-hmm.
place than a wean you off. And
Now,
that
in the same
seems.
vein, you're driving the Kona EV, so where are you charging it? Because you can't charge at your apartment.
No, I have to charge it. Well, I haven't run out of battery with it just yet, but
Oh,
yeah, it hasn't. I haven't driven 250 miles with it just yet, but uh, I would have to charge it at it came with a charge point card, but those are very slow. And I think the ones near me are Electrify America and SEMA Connect is at a
mm-hmm.
couple grocery stores near me. Um,
How close are
so
they? I'm curious.
close.
Yeah.
The closest one, the grocery store, the Kroger near me is like half a mile,
Oh,
quarter,
okay.
3/4 of a mile away. Yeah,
Do you usually grocery shop there,
I
or
do
would that
usually
be a
go there.
lifestyle change to grocery shop? So you
No,
could go to the grocery store and slowly cruise down the aisle.
yeah,
Okay, and
yeah.
then charge
It'll
a
be fine.
little.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And the other grocery store is also a Kroger. It's further away, but they've got also the SEMA Connect stations. So that one's about 2.5 miles
Mm-hmm.
away.
Got it. Okay.
And you can only be, not that I would be in the grocery store for 3 hours, but you have a maximum of 3 hours at the charging station, and there's only two for the entire parking lot. So it's like,
I mean, it is Georgia.
yeah, or I guess it's four. It's two stalls, but they have
Okay.
two plugs. So there's four, yeah. So four, but still out of hundreds of stalls, it's got to fight for it if you want it. But
So here's a good question. Do you know when the 2023 Telluride's on sale? I'm assuming it's on sale now.
it's, yeah. Well, actually, no, actually, because when I saw my friend who had the Nero come to his dealership, I said, well, you must be getting Tellurides pretty soon too. And he says he doesn't think they're going to get those till actually closer to the end of the year,
Oh, okay.
maybe even early next year, which is interesting because you're
Yeah.
driving them this month or October.
Yeah, that is the weird one. Let's go over
Yeah.
this laundry list of things that we're going to go see.
Yeah.
We're driving the Grand Wagoneer L, because if the regular Grand Wagoneer wasn't grand enough, you can get
It's
a
not
longer
great.
one.
Yeah.
Then we'll be going to take a look at the Ford Super Duty, and then we'll see GM's new heavy duty trucks simultaneously as well. Then there's of November, we'll be seeing Ram's EV or plug-in hybrid truck most likely at the Los Angeles Auto Show.
Mhm.
Are you coming to the Nissan Aria event? I don't remember.
I believe you said I couldn't. So you didn't
Okay,
have
that's
room
right.
for me.
Yeah,
I
so
don't remember.
we'll be driving the Aria. That seems like
I would love
great
to.
landing, but a very delayed flight.
Yeah, because it was supposed to be. Wasn't it supposed to be available like a year ago?
I want to
Like
say maybe 2 years. Maybe
almost.
someone can comment in the comment section if they
Not two
recall
years,
when it
but
was
like
actually
I
supposed
don't
to
think
be
it was
on
2 years,
sale.
but it was definitely like this time last year. I was like, all right, we should be like driving
Yeah,
these
it's
soon,
definitely a little on the late side, and
Yeah.
apparently the volume is going to be very restricted right at the first because it's not going to be built in the U.S. like the Leaf is. It's going to be built in Japan only at the moment.
Yeah. Well, the
And
couple of
then, like
people
you
I've
said, we're
seen
going to get to
drive it
see the
already. I know KBB, they've driven it briefly.
yes, a bunch of people drove it on a track in
Yeah.
Spain.
Yeah.
So I was not invited and did not seek that because apparently you couldn't drive it on real roads, which seemed like really stupid.
Yeah.
Then there's the Nero, the Crown, the Highlander Turbo, and Corolla all-wheel drive,
Well, the
CRV
Corolla Cross
Telluride,
hybrid, right?
and a mysterious new Subaru.
The Corolla is the Corolla Cross hybrid, maybe also the regular hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of cars in one day.
Yes, there's a bunch of them.
It's one day for all those.
And then of course there's that Turbo Highlander. V6 is dead.
That'll be interesting. Yeah, yeah. I mean, we drove that. We've driven it in a couple of things, but I mean, I don't think it'll be too much of a change. At least not for me. But maybe I don't know. People who drive Highlanders, especially like parents who probably don't care too much about what's under the hood unless it's really inefficient. I feel like they're going to drive it and be like, "This is fine." I mean, we'll see.
Yeah.
We don't know yet because we haven't driven it. So.
Yeah, we don't know really.
We really don't.
Here we go. So why still no guidance from GM Chevy as to whether Bolts qualify for the new 2023 tax credit? Surely they know now. This is actually a tricky one. It does not appear that they know now. The problem is going to be the mineral content of the batteries. So they have to get a valuation from the entire length of the supply chain as far as the value of the refining done in China for the materials, the cell manufacture done wherever, the electrolyte structures, etc. All of that is going to be critical because the entire pack itself, including like the steel casing, etc., has to be a minimum percentage from North America or our free trade allies. And that is kind of a complicated process because there's no current database for these things because no one cared about it until now. Only now is this a problem because only now is it going to be a requirement. So they're scrambling, and the last I heard was that GM should probably know internally, probably by November. Rumors, mind you, so nothing very definite here. They'll probably know by November. One would expect they'll make a press release or announcement sometime around November and December. I would be surprised if they didn't qualify for the tax credit. Let me put it that way, because the starting point is kind of low. And because of all the other components in this contraption, the steel and where that's made and the manufacture of the cells, etc., that all goes into that. So I would expect that they'll still be okay. Ultium, it looks like they had more of a handle on Ultium as far as sourcing, etc. So they're pretty confident in the Ultium side of things.
This includes the Bolt EV and the EUV, right?
Correct.
And so they just they slashed the prices for 2023 on them.
They did, yeah.
I mean,
GM is the only one being super aggressive on EV pricing, it seems like.
So if, in case no one's looked, the 2022 Bolt EV used to start at 31.5. Now for 2023, it starts at 26.5. So
it is going to be crazy cheap when tax season comes back because, I mean, they might raise it again for 2024. We don't know, but it does appear that GM's pricing for EVs has actually been in a strong downward trajectory.
Yeah.
So ID4 software, it is changed for 2023. There have been a few tweaks here and there, but we don't have all of the details just yet. There is or was a drive program for the 2023 model. That's going to be the one built in Chattanooga. That Chattanooga factory has been pretty delayed, but it will be built there, and it will get a revised center console for America that's going to have a little bit more elbow room as well. So there we go. Here's a good one. BRZ recall, or sorry, BZ4X, the Busy Force. Yeah, this is a wacky one. I don't understand why it's taking so long to make sure wheels don't fall off. I would have thought that would be an easy one. We also don't know all the details exactly. It appears that it is using a new hub design for Toyota, which is why they caught it. Apparently the hub and the bolts are not the same as some of their other vehicles. maybe for low friction requirements, etc. But it is affecting the Subaru Solterra sales as well. They're all on sales hold. The North American side just says they're waiting for Japan to decide on a fix, and at that point they will recall everything, swap everything out, and it does appear that it's going to be a hardware change. So the hub may have to be replaced.
But so these were the cars that had the issues were only cars that hadn't been given to customers, though, correct?
That's what it sounds like. It sounds like no customers were affected. And I'm assuming that people are still just driving their busy forks around because Toyota's told them to park them, but I'm going to go ahead and guess that not everybody has done that. So I don't know how prevalent the problem really is.
Yeah, I haven't been following it too closely, but I hadn't heard any solution had been made yet officially.
So here's a good one. So Ron, the reason Honda does not have any plug-in hybrids is because they don't believe in them, they claim. They killed their last plug-in hybrid, and Honda is a very pragmatic company, quite like Toyota, but maybe even a bit more conservative engineering-wise. So oddly, their solution is just dive straight on into General Motors' Ultium platform. So Honda's not even really doing their own dedicated EV platform. They're co-doing things with GM. Mm-hmm. How much GM and how much Honda we're going to see, honestly, I do not know, because you talk to the GM people and they're just like, Honda's along for the ride. And you talk to the Honda people and they're mighty defensive. And they say, well, we're co-developing the platform with General Motors, except it's going to be built in a GM factory. But at any rate, we'll see how that goes for them. The benefit to Honda will be that, again, as we've just been talking about, GM seems to be really aggressive at Ultium pricing. So that may actually be better for Honda than if they had gone it their own way.
Yep, I agree.
Thanks for the super chat here, Drew.
Thank you.
Oh yes, this is a good one.
Wow. Yeah, and I so it's funny because we're the one car that I think everybody knows now that was recognizable with amber turn signals was the Kia Telluride until they just refreshed it for 2023, and they've gotten rid of on the top Prestige trim the amber turn signals, which is crazy because everyone loved that, so they've gotten rid of it too. But I don't know I mean, you might know more about the safety and logistics involved, but I feel like it's definitely, there's regulations on the color of LEDs and how certain LEDs can't be shining while other LEDs are shining, and the colors have to, I don't know, there's all this stuff involved.
The long answer is short answer is it's styling. And the long answer is the front turn signals have to be amber in America. Daytime running lights can be amber or white. Those are the allowed colors up front. The longer answer for why we get fewer amber turn signals in the back in America is twofold. The first and most important one is styling, because some customers, and oddly some car stylists, so manufacturers' design departments, seem to prefer red turn signals, which blows my mind. Mm-hmm. Safety-wise, Europe has decided that they're much safer. They've got studies that prove it. In America, it seems like few studies have ever been done, but studies in Europe say amber turn signals in the rear are safer. And they remove the ambiguity question of
what is that light?
What is that thing? Yeah. And this was obviously worse in America before we got the center brake light back in the 1980s when we didn't have the center mounted stoplight. Brian doesn't remember, he wasn't born. It was really ambiguous because you just had two, and one's blinking and one's not, and it's like, is he riding the brake? Is one of the lights burnt out? We don't know. Now there's a little less ambiguity, but still kind of a lot. And the regulation part that caused some of this is this deal. So Volkswagen in Europe and Audi Group had some really slim, those really cool, slim progressive turn signals, totally not legal in the US. Their dimensions were very small vertically, and the progressive nature of the light both proved to be challenging for North American regulations, because in North America, Canada goes by the same regulations. In North America, the turn signal has to be a particular square inch size, has to be at least a minimum size, and has to blink. You can't do a progressive thing. Now, you might be thinking, but don't some auto manufacturers have progressive elements? The answer is yes, but the one that counts for the legislation is a single block that blinks. So, for instance, like the Lexus RX, the previous generation where it had the progressive thing, there was a big yellow block, and it blinked on and off, and the rest of it did its progressive thing. That's why those tail lamps look that way. There's like a big section, blinks on and off. The rest can do its thing, and it doesn't matter.
I forget.
Now, Audi is
We're sorry. Were we able to confirm that the new Mustang still keeps its sequential?
it does keep its
It
sequential
does.
thing.
Okay.
Yep. So Audi had these really slim lamps. They were too small to just blink on and off and still qualify as a turn signal in the U.S. So Audi had to use the brake light as a turn signal in North America. And Audi was really riding high style-wise in the early 2000s and 2010s, and lots of manufacturers were copying Audi. And I found it really intriguing that speaking to some Mercedes designers and Volvo designers, Volvo, safety-obsessed Volvo, said that this generation XC90, XC60, etc., they said they went with red turn signals publicly, said this out loud in North America because Audi did it. And they thought Americans liked it. And so that was why we got stuck with those for a while. And then somehow they decided to give us amber again in the XC40 and some models. But yeah, primarily styling is the short answer there.
Do we also think it's styling that's driving some of them to put the rear turn signals down low in the bumper? Because I see a lot of people complain about that, but it's also something to keep note of is you're not technically supposed to be so close when you're behind a car in front of you in a stop and in the traffic line. You're not supposed to be so close that you can't see the bottom of their bumper. So if you can't see those turn signals, you're too close.
A lot of that ends up being styling too. So the rules around tail lamps and tail lamp locations, etc., is complicated. But the long and short of it is they have to be particular dimensions. They do have to be particular heights off the ground, but those are allowed. In some European vehicles where perhaps they had a rear fog light and then the brake light wasn't large enough to be a turn signal, they'll relocate them there. Or, and this is a critical one for like first generation Bolt, pretty much the entire Audi crossover lineup, etc. If the brake light moves or the turn signals move, you have to have a secondary lamp. It's like Buick Cascada. When you open the trunk lid, the turn signals lights move up with the trunk lid, so there's a second set of lights in there, which is why we see those in the BMW iX and in the Q5, for instance, etc. Anytime those lamps move, there's a second set somewhere else that also has to blink, which is kind of a quirky North American thing there. I mean, logically, because if your hatch is open and you're driving down the road with something hanging out, then people probably need to see your lights.
Right.
Let's see here. Have we heard anything? We just talked about the Toyota Prius. They haven't said anything about a plug-in hybrid that I can recall.
They haven't said anything, but people are saying things.
People are saying things. Toyota has not said publicly. Let's put it that way.
No.
I would expect that there's going to be a prime model because Toyota is doing plug-in hybrids.
I actually think personally that it should only come back as a prime. I don't think they should even bring back. I think they should.
Toyota disagrees. Efficiency is king.
I know. I hope it works out for them because if it does end up looking good, which I can't. I mean, we saw it. I don't know. I think it looks better than the current one. I think if most people react the way that we did, it'll finally be a car that's like, oh, I don't feel weird being seen in a Prius. Aside from the fact that it's a super efficient car, I think I hope it works for them because
here's a good question. I don't think it's really a chemistry thing actually for this specific question here, but from what I have heard from some government people that are doing the data crunching here, my memory is bad on exactly where this info came from, so don't take this as rote, but my understanding is that the bigger trouble for biofuels is that there's not enough arable land in the world to satisfy the demand for fuels just in North America. So biofuels are really not very efficient as far as the conversion from the fuel stock to the actual usable fuel. Ethanol, for instance, is very energy intensive. And biofuels, biodiesel is a little bit better, but not that much better. So that's the biggest problem with biofuels like that. We'll see how Porsche does because Porsche seems to be really into it. And Delta Airlines also is really into the possibility of bio airplane fuel. So we'll know. We'll know soon if they can make it all work.
And was it Alaska or Air Canada that I saw they just bought the world's first production? I believe it's hybrid commercial planes. I don't know if they're hybrid or full electric. I think they were hybrids. But it was some weird new
I
alternative
do
fuel
not
for a plane.
recall.
I don't know. I'll have to look. But yeah, I think I saw that, that's cool. That's a funny thing. It's
Hmm.
like planes are so big, much larger scale, much grander scale. It'll be a long time before we ever see long haul flights or even just domestic flights that are fully electric planes.
Hmm.
I mean, maybe, I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah.
Technology accelerates so fast.
So Leo here, this is a good one. Model Y is looking very good for tax credits. So if you want to get your tax credit on a Model Y and you want to get it as soon as possible, you don't want to place your order now. You probably want to place your order maybe next month, it's kind of looking like. Because at least if you believe Tesla, it looks like the delivery dates for the Model Y could include December 2022. That might be unrealistic. You'd have to actually call maybe their order center to ask, but you probably want to put your order in soon because Tesla's batteries and where they're manufactured and that process, that does look good for the tax credit rebate. But few things to keep in mind. We do need to wait for official determinations on the sourcing of materials. Probably okay. Price tag, probably okay as well, because most versions of the Model Y are fine. SUVs get an extra bump in the price cap, so $88,000. As long as you're under that, you should be fine. And then income testing is the next problem. You have to have an adjusted gross income as a married couple under 250 grand. So that is more of a demographic problem for EV shoppers right now. The reality is that as much as car companies want to make EVs for different kinds of shoppers out there, the electric car buyer and owner right now is very homogenous. It is by and large married couples, single family home owners, middle and upper middle income families as well. There tend to be very few middle and lower income families that are buying EVs.
Right.
It does happen, but it's not a huge amount. Very few people that live in condos, apartments, or townhomes as well. Really low. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly how some of this plays out. This could help push desirability down a little bit towards lower income tiers, but we just don't know how that's all going to go.
Right.
Let's see here. Angry Bear wants to know if you would recommend buying a 3-year-old XC60. What would you say, Brian?
I mean, I think it's what that would make it a 2019. I think that should be all right. I mean, I don't know the specific data on it, but in terms of the actual car itself, that was far enough into its life cycle that it's currently in that I think a lot of kinks and things should be worked out by then. Because this current generation, when did it come out? Was it 17, 16? It's around there, I think.
I could be getting this wrong, but I think 16 was XC90.
That was the
17
model
was
year.
XC60.
Yeah. So
I
I think I don't know. I don't see why not.
I would probably get an extended warranty. You know, any of the Europeans, and this goes as much for Volvo and BMW, Mercedes, Audi, everything there, all of the parts are going to be more expensive and repairs are going to be more expensive than others. I've owned multiple Volvos, so I have a soft spot for Volvo, mind you, so keep that in mind. But my V70R was my last one. It was not overly reliable. It was better than Jag, that's for sure. But the warranty was easy to deal with. That's probably what I would do. Do a CPO, get a warranty, and then you can always decide how long you want to keep it after that, etc. But I do really like the current generation XC60, and I personally think it's worth it. That's sort of, I think, the bigger thing to decide, I guess, is are you okay with unreliability? It's a personal decision. If you want reliable, you're not going to get the luxury features and functions and the handling ability that you find in unreliable cars. A lot of that just tends to make the vehicle less reliable.
Right.
Did you see the news on that Xpeng?
I'm
not sure how we're supposed to pronounce it. G9.
I did. That's some pretty impressive specs. But as you pointed out in your Facebook post about it, I mean, realistically, even here we couldn't really do much with that kind of charging speed.
Yeah, I'm still strangely impressed. I want to see one. I want to see one in person.
Those cars are pretty. Like if you look in, like they've been doing some pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah.
At that company. So I'm curious to see more about what they're up to. Yeah.
Yeah, for those that are not in the know, this Chinese manufacturer, because EVs are a really big business in China at the moment,
Yeah.
they have developed the world's fastest charging car in terms of the amount of energy or the amount of power the vehicle can accept. So 480 kilowatts maximum charge rate is
Right.
bonkers, bonkers. This is nearly double the charge rate that you can get in the fastest charging Tesla currently.
Mhm.
Um, I want to see one in person. I want to see how big this connector is.
Right.
Apparently, in order to do this, they've bumped the maximum current up a little bit. So in the US, charging stations generally top out at 500 amps. In the in China, it's going to be 600 amps, but 1600 volts. That's how they're getting to that power level. I want to see what this connector's like.
Yeah, do you think it's going to be like a cart? Because I saw someone saying it's like you have to roll it out, like parts of it on like an apparatus and get
I
it to the
wouldn't think
car.
so. It's only a little bit above the 500 amp connector that we have here in the US. So, and the current rating is what determines the conductor size by and large.
Right.
So, I mean, obviously there's variables here to anything and there are other factors, but generally speaking, it's the current. So, 500 amps you can do sort of, I don't have anything around here that's the right size, but something maybe, a conductor that's smaller than your thumb for sure, you can do 500 amps across. 600 amps is not going to require that much larger. It's going to definitely be liquid cooled, definitely not going to be overly flexible. But it is using apparently the new charging standard in China, which only that car supports now, I guess.
So how do you think like in the long term this is going to go? Because the way I'm perceiving the evolution of electric cars and charging in general is sort of how smartphones evolved. They got big, 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 big,
Hmm.
and then they got so big we're not going to make them bigger anymore. The screen technology is going to have to change so we can fill out the bezels, fill out the actual
Yeah.
structure of the phone, and make the phone still be the same size physically in your hand, but you get more screen real estate. And now the phones are sort of starting to stay at this peak size. They're really not. Once you
Hmm.
get bigger than they're going, it's a tablet. So it's like the same thing
Right.
with cars. Like you're going to hit a ceiling of how big these charging cables can be and how fast these cars can
Yeah.
actually charge.
And it's a pain in the butt to use the ones. I
Yeah.
mean, they're not very flexible, and then you have connection problems because you're trying to insert this connector in your car, and it's getting pulled strangely. So now there's all this stress on the connector,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah.
It is definitely a weird thing, even with the CCS connectors and the Tesla cables that we have now. Going to that next level from there, which mind you, the Tesla charge cable is not designed to accommodate the fastest charging that we even have in the US.
Mm.
So now CCS is 350 kilowatts max. Tesla's current network is 255 max, but the next generation supercharging is likely going to eclipse what we see from CCS. That'd be my guess. But expect big, bulky, chunky cables that have that exact same problem that we see with the CCS things. I don't know if you've been at some of those 350 kW stations, but those cables are not easy to navigate. They're really inflexible.
No, they're like fire hoses, kind of.
Yeah, because
They're
they've got the water cooling jacket in them to cool the cable.
yeah, it's very similar. Yeah.
Yeah. Here's a good one. So Grand Cherokee, why is it the only mainstream unibody vehicle with a low range transfer case? It's really just um,
Is the Forerunner not also in that
Forerunner.
category?
Forerunner's not unibody.
It's not unibody still. Okay.
Um, I will push back on one thing. Least reliable brand is tricky when we're talking about the way reliability statistics are calculated. So first up, when you look at number of problems per 100 vehicles, Jeep is not that far off of average because we're really not talking about a very big range. Not that many problems separate the most reliable from the least reliable in the US. The second thing to keep in mind is how vehicles are used, and this is really, really critical. So Jeep as a brand only makes SUVs. They don't make small cars. They don't make ultra efficient things. When you look at a brand like Toyota, they skew very heavily towards very efficient and very reliable drivetrain designs. So high percentages of RAV4s, which are very simple mechanically. About 30% of RAV4s are the hybrid system, which is very reliable. High percentage of Priuses and Camrys and things like that are reliable as well. Toyota makes very few off-road oriented vehicles in terms of volume. They have the Tacoma, the 4Runner, they have the Land Cruiser, which is dead now, and then they have the LX and a few things like that. But they don't sell in enormous volume, except for the Tacoma. Tacoma is really the only one that sells in big volume. And if you're using it in off-road situations or doing any of that kind of thing with it, unreliability is going to creep in. Anytime you add more stuff to a vehicle, you have more opportunities for unreliability. So if you look at a Grand Cherokee, we've got not just the 2-speed transfer case. We've got locking differentials, which are not available on any of the competition. We've got an adaptive air suspension, adaptive dampers. We've got LCD instrument clusters, passenger side LCD screens, etc. Gobs and gobs more stuff that is available than you will find in anything else. And that's why their reliability is quite similar to, for instance, Land Rover with a very similar mission. Also really not that far off of Volvo, Audi, BMW, Mercedes when you take a look at comparable vehicles in those lineups. You take a look at an X5 with an air suspension, a GLS with an air suspension, they're not going to be the pinnacle of reliability.
Right.
But this is also why Lexus has really stayed away from things like that, if we look at that as a competitor. So, Lexus LX has an adaptive suspension, but the design is fairly different, and it took them a long time to deliver that kind of feature functionality. It's only recently that Lexus has decided to give us turbocharged engines in America, things like that.
Do you think that's why they've decided to make the Trailhawk 4xe only now? I guess.
Yeah, I was intrigued by that choice.
The
I'm
move.
not entirely clear why they're going in that direction, because I dislike the 4xe system off-road. I think on-road, totally fine. Off-road, not my jam.
Yeah.
The engagement of the clutch in EV mode, which is what they highlight a lot, in hybrid mode, which is what they highlight a lot, the clutch engagement's not great because it does not have a torque converter. And in daily driving, you're never going to notice it. But if you are truly taking your Grand Cherokee to the limit, so if you want to take it to Moab and you want to rock crawl in your Grand Cherokee, it will do it, absolutely no question. But the way that the 4xe does it is bizarre, because if you're really doing that like quarter of a mile an hour, 1/10 of a mile an hour, true low speed crawl situations, the clutch can engage or not engage, can engage, not engage. Not a big fan.
I can see that getting annoying.
Yeah. Let's see here. Let's find another question here. Who else is asking here? So Lance is saying 600 volts would be thinner cabling. Yes, except that the current rating's going way up. So we don't know all the details. Also, the separation between the conductors would have to go up because the risk of arcing would go up with the voltage. So lots of details that we don't know. But theoretically, yes, at 1600 volts peak versus 1000 volts peak, you could use a smaller conductor for that. But the max current rating is the key there. Their cable is designed for 600 amps max, so it's this combination of things, versus 500 amps for the CCS max in the US currently. So details are really hard to find on China's new GB/T charging standard. So if anybody finds any good actual specifications that are somehow translatable, let us know. And looks like we have porn popping up in the chat section. Sorry about that, guys. Just had to block those out. Anyway, fun
That's
times.
a new one.
So yeah.
I was going to try to click one, but again, I forgot to log in before, so I can't access the chat myself. But there was a question about the new Subaru Crosstrek, which they just unveiled this week for Japan. I assume that's what we're going to be looking at later in November, because we were supposed to go to a Subaru thing. They didn't tell us what Subaru it is, but now that they've unveiled that, I imagine that's probably what we're going to be seeing.
Yeah.
Do you think?
You could be right. I think that it's not, but
what do you think?
Neither of us know.
Well, like, what could it be? Like
I'm gonna guess maybe it would be a Subaru hybrid or something, because if we've already seen the refreshed Crosstrek there, I don't think they would be as secret about it now. Right. They would normally have told us you're gonna see the refreshed Crosstrek.
Yeah. Well,
Usually
speaking of
how they go, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. I guess if you're, probably not too many Subaru fans on here, but if you are, I think it's a nice evolution over the current one. I feel like, and I've said this to Alex before, but it seems like Subaru, though they do have generally a normal life cycle for their vehicles in terms of how long they take between each generation.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm always reading about a new generation of their models. Like, I feel like it feels like it's been 3 years, but it's been 6-ish years since that one came out. But it just feels like the Forester gets like our new generation every 3 years. It's like for some reason their timeline goes by faster for me than it actually is going. But yeah, I mean it's the same interior as everything else they have of that size now. It's got the full
Mhm.
vertical touchscreen, which I heard I've never used it myself, but apparently no one likes it. So and plug-in hybrid in Japan. Don't know if
Yeah.
is it a plug-in? Yeah.
I don't
And,
mind the tall touchscreen.
no, I think
The
it looks cool.
software is not as elegant as most of the
Right.
mainstream competitions. I don't care for the graphics on it,
Right.
but the functionality is fine and it's snappy. There's nothing wrong with it. If you like the style and style is more of a personal taste, it's probably just fine. But yeah, as this guy's pointing out, yeah, they're showing the ones with the charging door in the rear quarter panel, and we know
Yes.
that Subaru is using and will continue to be using Toyota's hybrid technology
Mm-hmm.
in their vehicles. So. What I actually am surprised at, and this is maybe where I'm curious, is I'm surprised we've never received an Outback hybrid or plug-in hybrid, and
Yeah.
that's what
Yeah.
I wonder if they're going to show us somehow. But again, total guesses. It could just be like a boring American Crosstrek, which is basically what was seen with the steering wheel on the other side.
Right. Right.
So I don't know.
Pretty predictable.
Yeah. Um,
Somebody's
Let's see
asking.
here. Schedule for the new Mazda lineup. We've been wondering about that too. We don't have any good details yet.
It seems that things have been delayed because the CX-50 and the CX-90 were both supposed to be coming out this year. We've
Hmm.
heard obviously we've already driven CX-50, CX-90. We have not. We've just now seen mules of that car spied
Right.
testing around. They just look like the CX-60 in Europe with a big, third
Yeah.
row of like windows and stuff tacked onto the back. So very early prototype. But Mazda's US website says both of those cars were supposed to be revealed this year. So, and they haven't updated that website, that little site on their little page for their new SUV lineup they have on there. So I have a
Mazda's
feeling it's been
launches are
delayed.
pretty late,
Yeah, I have a feeling
generally.
we might
Yeah.
not see it till next year.
Hmm.
CX-90, and then we've got to see the CX-70, which
Hmm.
is just like the smaller version of that. I don't know.
Yep. I hate to tell you, Carlos and Brad, but the STI is dead.
Dead.
So we will not get one.
You want that?
Subaru rather unexpectedly announced that there will not be an STI in this generation of WRX.
Yes.
They have said that their future is electrification and that any possible future model would be electric at some
Electric.
point.
Yeah.
So we just don't know what that will look like just yet.
It will look like
Um,
a GR Corolla.
yeah. And yes, Jay, Skyactiv appears to be a myth in the US. I have driven
X,
it and I thought it was fantastically interesting. There were some unresolved emissions challenges with nitrous oxide emissions, things like that. Um, we don't know. They
Or you
seem
did drive
uninterested in it.
an Skyactiv X engine.
Yes, I've driven a Skyactiv
And
X
so,
engine.
what like describe the difference between?
It
Like,
feels a little diesely,
yeah,
and it
because it operates like
switches.
a diesel, sort
It
of. Yeah.
essentially it is diesel-like in the compression ignition,
Yeah.
but it's doing the compression ignition in a slightly different way. It's using a spark plug to control when this compression event happens and how the flame front continues.
Right.
So it's an interesting twist on it, but it is able to spend most of its time in compression ignition mode. It can actually swap between that and a spark ignition mode. Why they're not bringing it to the US, no one knows exactly for sure. I'm guessing that the fuel economy savings maybe weren't enough to justify the cost or warranty concerns. Also, with Mazda, it's a money problem. Mazda does not have a lot of cash, is the problem. They're a very small independent company. They are very minorly owned by Toyota, has a small minor investment in them, much less than they have in Subaru. And I don't think they have the cash to bring some of their interesting developments really to market. Just like it seems unlikely that we're going to really see a Wankel at any time soon. I just wouldn't bet on it.
A Wankel.
Sam's asking how the Durango's going. It's going just fine. No problems with it actually so far. We don't drive it as much as I would like, but I still generally like it. It generally fits. If you have any specific questions, you can follow up down there and let us know if you're asking about anything particular. Let's see here.
Martin's asking about the Crown. We'll be driving that next month.
Yeah. Do you think that do you think that Toyota can make the Crown work?
I just don't know. My
Because it
I
kind
don't
of
know.
is and is they're saying it is and it isn't an Avalon replacement.
No, like they won't say it is, but it clearly is. Unless it was just coincidental that, oh, we're bringing a Crown. Oh, they're killing the
Mm.
Avalon. Well, you're getting the
Or
Crown anyway.
two of their engineers said it was.
Well, there you go. So,
They accidentally slipped up and called it the Avalon replacement. And then I said,
oops.
What?
That's not what the PR team said. I'm kidding, but yeah, I think it's a very unique looking car, and therefore it'll attract. Like when we were at the event looking at it, there were people that thought it looked like an Audi, which I was like, I don't know what Audi this looks like, but
Yeah, I was confused by that
that
too.
was a weird comparison. But I mean, it's a good looking. I think it's a good looking car,
As long as you don't get the two color one.
as long as you don't get the black hood. Like goodness gracious, that
Yeah,
was
don't get the black and red one.
yeah, or the black
Looks
and
like
red.
an angry bee.
Yeah. Other than that, I think it's a unique looking car. There's really nothing else on our roads that look quite like it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess the Arteon from Volkswagen kind of has a similar vibe to it, but this is not. I don't think this is as big as that car, and it's not a liftback, so that's one deterrent. It's not going to have the practicality of like a Stinger or an Arteon, and so I wonder, who's going to say, "Well, I didn't like the Avalon, but I like this." I mean, maybe I don't know, and it's going to have the same two powertrains, the hybrid powertrains, including the same one from the RX 500 that we drove, which they're calling on Toyota side Hybrid Max. And I liked the 500h powertrain in the RX, so I'm very eager to see how it feels in the Crown, smaller, lowered to the ground vehicle, lighter weight, I would assume. But that part I'm excited about. But the rest of the car, I don't know. We'll have. It's
Yeah.
going to be.
I'm intrigued that they are and are not calling it a sedan. Like they're
Right.
trying super hard to not use the sedan word, even though it comes out of their mouths a lot. And that I think is the part that I'm wondering about its future. Like maybe if it had been a Outback styled wagon,
Yeah.
maybe it could have been a greater success because it could have had that reputation of being the more reliable Subaru. I don't know if that would have worked for them, but they did not do that. And it does have a regular trunk for anybody that's wondering.
Yes, the regular old trunk that's not even like super
yeah.
large. It's not like out of.
And it doesn't really
above
look any
average.
higher off the ground than the Camry, to me at least. We don't have specs yet.
We don't have ground clearance, but we know it's 4 inches taller. I think.
Right. Yeah, the roof
So,
line
like-
is a tiny bit taller, but the headroom in the rear wasn't exactly great.
No,
So
no.
we'll see.
So I don't know.
Um,
It's all-wheel drive, so that'll help it. But
Yeah. Drew has an interesting one here. Why didn't any auto manufacturer adopt the monoblade wiper like Mercedes did in the 90s? Too expensive. Are they better? I didn't mind Mercedes monoblade wiper, but the way they did it was pretty expensive. And that's because they had a really eccentrically articulating arm. So it was a very complicated thing because when you look at it, you kind of like, if this is the wiper going across your screen, it kind of started out here. And then as it went up to the corner, it didn't just go all the way around. It actually extended out and then wiped that corner of the screen and then came back down and had this like little M shape, and it bopped around there, and then it went back out, and then it came back in. So it was really a very eccentric wiper. And then Jag copied it because Jag was like, we need one of those on our sedan. And then they just made it go backwards and forwards, and that was terrible. Because the Jaguar one didn't go as fast as the Mercedes one, and it didn't, extend out to the corners of the windscreen. So in heavy rain, I had an XJ that had that mono wiper thing. I didn't like it because in a rainstorm, you're kind of leaning over like this, trying to see out of the spot that's actually clear because this spot's not clear. And that was just not convenient. Let's put it that way.
I think they should just they should go back to not go back to, but they should do the 3 wiper blade situation that the FJ Cruiser had.
The 3 wiper blades are hilarious. I don't mind a lot of wiper blades. I think that looks adorable on some vehicles.
It is funny.
There was also like the 2 parallel blades that kind of followed each other. It wasn't like the 2 side-by-side ones that have different cams. They were practically the same. That was funky.
Yeah.
The Germans love trying to re-engineer things that don't necessarily need to be re-engineered.
Reinvent
There's
the
no
wheel,
particular reason to not have 2 wiper blades. I mean, it's not really a functional disadvantage.
There's only so much you can do.
Yeah.
Really.
But there's the one wiper blade I don't think is a functional advantage either, but it did look cool. At least I thought they were cool.
Yeah.
Maybe
It's-
that makes me uncool.
Maybe. I mean, you like your shifter, your reverse to be up onto the right, which I find
Reverse is
strange.
down to the right,
Down
down,
to the
right,
right.
and
Ah, see,
down.
that doesn't.
Yes,
I don't
only
like that.
monsters like it left and up. That's the wrong place for reverse. It's just how it is.
I'm pretty sure
Um,
the Cadillac CT5V Blackwing had it in the right on my preferred side, but
doesn't make it
I guess
right.
it's a
It's just
demonic
wrong. It's
vehicle.
just wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, Acura Integra to the right and down, just as God
And
intended.
speaking of Integra, I mean, I know we're going to answer this question, but really quickly, I remember that reminded me the Integra, presumably the Type S, was spied this week for the first time.
I'm really hoping that doesn't suck.
I know, because it could be really good if they do it right.
Mm-hmm. I'm guessing Type R engine detuned.
Right.
Really, really praying it's not
do you
the
think they'd give it more
1.5
power?
liter.
Because I guess Type S is a different mission than Type R, but
Yes.
still, I feel like it's the Acura, right? You know, it should
No, Acura's Type S mission is not Type R, which got me a tiny bit disappointed. And this is how it goes down. So, when TLX Type S was launched, and we had the pre-embargo press conferences. It was during the pandemic shutdown, etc. They had these small groups of journalists, and we were allowed to have the super secret login code, and we had to promise that nobody would get any information. We couldn't leak anything, and we're interviewing the engineers, etc. about this through translators. It was a very arduous process. At any rate, then I was a little bit, maybe, I don't know. I got a call back from Honda, let's put it that way. At any rate, so in the question and answer period, I was posing the question of, do you think it's competitive when we see Audi with an S4 and we see an RS4 in some markets, and we have Volvo with 455 bonkers horsepower in an S60? I'm just saying, in this world, where does TLX fit? Or, has the world moved on? So it's funny. After everything was done, I got a call back from someone on the PR team, and they said, we just wanted to make sure that we are framing Type S properly. Type S has never been AMG. It has never been M. It has never been RS. It has always only been the world that BMW is now starting to embrace, M performance. So that was their take, was that
F-Sport.
Expectations should be lower than M or AMG, etc. So they're doing it the Acura way. So it's more power for Acura. Mm-hmm. So when I asked, I said, so is there going to be a Type R? They said, well, there has been an Acura Type R, but they have no plans currently to make Type R anything more than a Honda exclusive for the Civic. So that's the word there. So my guess would be less than Type R.
Well,
because they have had an Acura Type R in the past.
Do you remember which one that was?
Ooh, that was a long time ago. RSX Type R, something like that. So I'm sure someone will tell us. Was it Integra? I think they called it the Integra. Is that family of vehicles? I think it was Integra Type R.
I may not have been alive. That's possible.
I'm pretty sure you weren't alive. So someone's replacing their 2016 Golf Sport Wagon. Is the Outback XT my only option for fun all-wheel drive wagon at a reasonable price? The reasonable price thing is the key there, so yes. If you want a wagon that's not a Subaru, you have to buy a luxury wagon. Or
a used Regal Touareg from Buick.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing new here, so yeah, that's pretty much it. To be honest, though, all the crossovers are really just boxier wagons. But if you like that lower wagon profile, then yes, Outback is basically it.
Yeah. It's a shame.
So let's move on here. Yep, Integra Type R. So thanks for that. That's the one I was thinking of there. Yeah, that's the time Acura has had a Type R. It existed. Someone was asking, strangely, I don't know why this caught in my head. Someone was asking, do I mind the not wiper on the back of my EV6? And I know you are a fan of the Wiper Lovers Club. I really don't care.
Oh no, I don't. I mean, I don't actually mind it at all, really either.
Thought you were the I want to wiper.
No, I'm not. I don't think I have a strong stance on it. Actually, I prefer the clean look. But I mean, they could have put it up in the spoiler like Toyota does in most of their examples of that. but
Cost.
it's not steep enough that, because they say, oh well, the wind will push water off of it because of the angle of the windshield, and I'm like, from what I've heard and what I've seen driving it, doesn't necessarily do that. But my solution
Rain-X
is
does the same thing.
we'll just turn on the rear, the windshield, not the windshield, but the heater for the
Oh,
glass. That's what I always do when it's raining on a car like that.
you
It usually,
can also Rain-X. I mean,
yeah,
it's $8
there's
at
a solution.
Safeway. Go buy a bottle of Rain-X. It'll last you for 5 years. You'll
Yep.
probably leave it to your children.
Yeah.
Rain-X lasts a long, long time.
I just had to
So
replace the rear wiper on my. I told you about this, but I had to replace the rear
yes.
wiper
Did you
blade on my.
find the tiny wiper for your Veloster?
So yeah, you have. Well, I know like Amazon doesn't have one that small. None of the
Aw.
stores you can go there, they don't go that small. You have to buy it
Tiny
from
wiper problems.
Hyundai. Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, I don't mind it. I will say there is no solution. Rain-X is not the solution if you live in the country like I do and dust is a problem. So like nothing but cleaning the window will help you because there's no wiper. So
Yeah.
that is a bummer.
Oh,
I guess the benefit though is that in dusty climes, you will eventually scratch your glass if you're
mhm.
constantly wiping the dust off of your window.
Yes. Also, somebody just reminded me. Yeah, another going back to the wagon question. I think the new Mazda CX-50 does have a somewhat wagon-like, or more of a wagon-like shape than some other crossovers. So that is another option you should consider. I think because I liked the way those looked a lot. But whoever was asking that,
I have
that's
troubles calling it a wagon because it really isn't
well, I know,
one.
but it looks more like one than the CX-5 does. It's just got that lower sort of, I don't know, squat profile to it.
It's
Somebody in here
most
agrees because somebody mentioned
Yeah,
it.
it's mostly just design cues trying to
Oh, for
trick your
sure.
mind into
But so
making
is a
it look
wagon. I mean, a
wider.
wagon is just a design style, I
Oh,
guess,
but
right?
wagons have a more relaxed seating position. So they have a
True,
sedan
true.
seating position and a much lower roof line. So the roof line to floorboard level in the car is much lower.
Hmm.
Um, but the main thing would be the sedan-like driving position, which CX-50 does not have. That would be
Right.
the key thing.
That is true.
So, which is kind of why there is this argument in the Subaru community where some Subaru fans, especially the ones that are new to the Outback, really dislike calling it a wagon. But I think Subaru traditionalists love calling it a wagon because it is a wagon. And they got in when that's really definitely what it was. But the front doors forward, it is Subaru Legacy lifted. The
Yeah.
back doors are different and the
A
trunk is
Lavorde,
different.
really.
But
It's a
that's
Lavorde.
really that's the key thing for a wagon is that if there is a sedan front and a sedan variant especially, then it is definitely a wagon, which is what the Outback is. And
Right.
this generation, as I recall, there is no Japanese market plain wagon version. I think they're all the same now in Japan. But every generation prior for the Outback, when Outback was a standalone model, there has
Mhm.
always been an actual wagon variant in Japan
Right.
without the body cladding, without the raised ride height, etc. Just regular legacy wagon.
And I was just saying Lavorde out loud, but then I realized that's the wagon version of the Impreza, I believe,
Yeah, they've
which they still
called
make.
it. There's someone can correct us down there, but as I recall, Lavorg has sometimes been Outback.
Oh,
It's very
really?
confusing, or there was like Lavorg Grand or something like that.
Hmm.
So it kind of depends on what you call their.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's see here. Why did Honda pick a transmission made in India? Because that's where the cheap manufacturing was. The ZF transmission they did not like. That was the big thing. The ZF transmission was kind of an odd duck. Engineering wise, it's a marvel. Production use in cars, not everyone's a fan because the shifts feel very different from one another. As you're going from gear 1 to 9 or 9 to 1, two of the shifts in that spread use a very unique kind of clutch that no other transmission in the world uses. It's a positive engagement clutch. So basically, it has teeth that actually have to be put together. And the reason is it's a very strong connection method and it's very compact and it allowed them to route power through this very, very compact transmission casing. The rumor that I have heard, unsubstantiated, mind you, but I have heard this from people in the industry, from manufacturers that used the ZF9 speed automatic transmission. I have heard that the original development mules and units for the ZF transmission did not include this clutch. And that's why some manufacturers hopped on board, because it has a very, very, very aggressive first gear and a very, very high ninth gear. But when it came down to the actual production units, ZF decided that they needed this clutch in order to meet all the various engineering profiles for the transmission. And that some auto manufacturers felt they'd been a little cheated in this process. Honda also prefers to make their own transmissions, so their plan didn't really seem to be long-term to use the 9-speed for very long. It seemed like it was just going to be a few-year stopgap thing, which is what it turned into, because their development of their 10-speed transmission was already underway. But the Honda 10-speed is larger, does not appear to handle as much power as theoretically as possible in the ZF, but it appears to actually be just about as good as far as the ratio spread from 1 to 10. I'm actually surprised Honda has not tried to sell that transmission to other companies, because I kind of like their 10-speed. CVT, though, CVT is cheap, and that's why we see it in Civic and Integra. Cheap, good fuel economy, etc. Let's see here. Ooh, this is a good one. This always sets some people on edge here. The Mazda 3 Turbo. Have you driven the Mazda 3 yet?
I have, and I love the Mazda 3 in its current generation. I think the Turbo, it makes it quite a peppy car, but it still feels a little bit more mature. I actually think overall, if you're not pushing the car, it handles quite nicely around town. But yeah, if you push it, that's where you're gonna, like, if you push it too hard, that torsion beam rear suspension is going to show up more than the Integra. The Integra is independent back there.
Yeah, that's my one complaint about the Mazda 3 too. This rear suspension does not feel terribly well polished. Yeah. And then the second one is, why do we have such skinny tires from the factory? I think the main answer is Mazda needs the fuel economy scores in the U.S. Acura I like, but it is very much a luxury Civic, which the Integra has always been, to be frank. And to be very fair, there's nothing wrong with that because the price tag is appropriate. But it is in this weird middle ground where it's not Civic priced or Corolla priced, but it's not 2 Series or A3 priced either. In fact, fully loaded, an Integra ends up being a few $100s less than the least expensive 2 Series. So it is in this like premium-y middle ground, which is a difficult market to be in.
Yeah. I think the Mazda 3 actually gives the Integra a run for its money in terms of how it feels on the inside. They just did a lot. Mazda's, they're trying to go up market in a weird way.
So Bender's asking, will the CCS adapter retrofitting be free for older Teslas? It does not appear so.
No, all the $250, I think, is how much it costs.
The adapter is $250.
The adapter is $250.
But modifying your older Tesla to accept the adapter, that's not going to be free. No. We don't know how much it will cost, however. I'm not entirely clear that people will want the adapter. I'm really intrigued to see how this goes. The big claim to fame for Tesla is the supercharging network. But obviously at this point in time in the US, there are more CCS locations. Got to be careful with our terminology. More CCS locations in the US than supercharger locations. But they're not all as fast as a supercharger. So a lot of those are older 50 kilowatt and 80 kilowatt CCS stations, the one-offs, like that one station in the Safeway parking lot kind of a thing.
By the dumpsters, yeah.
Yeah, like back in by the dumpsters, where God knows what happens if it works. So I'm not overly sure what the advantage is. If you take your Model X to, I don't know, a charge point, a 50 kilowatt charge point behind the Rite Aid, it might take you so long to charge to the intended charge level that you might have just been better off waiting in line at the supercharger station. So I'm going to be intrigued to see how useful this is. I know that one of our viewers locally that has a Model S, a new Model S, he was able to get an adapter early thanks to family in South Korea because you've been able to import the adapter for a while and it worked totally fine. He uses it because the superchargers, where on his typical drive route, are very frequently full, and the Electrify America station is usually completely empty. So he will just go over there and charge there, and that does save him time,
Yeah.
and that will charge faster than those older, single mall unit kind of things, but still not as fast as the supercharger station. So there is a penalty for using the adapter.
Right.
Let's see. This is a good one. What do you think the best electric car on the market for regular folks around town, moderate trips of 500 miles would be?
Well, I was just looking at the list of everything we've got currently for sale, and I mean, I think it's Volkswagen ID4. I think that's the
ID4 is
answer.
pretty good value.
It's a good value. Excuse me. Um, for if you're gonna say quote unquote regular folk, yeah, it's got like the value pack or the value aspect. It's comfortable. It has enough room for a family of four and some stuff. Um, I don't think it's not the fastest charging, but it's not the slowest charging range
Yeah.
wise. It's definitely right there in sort of the meat of the pack in terms of cars around that price category. And you
Lots
can
of
get it in
included
all-wheel drive
charging.
for less than everything else in that price category. So,
Yeah. Lots of free charging.
and lots of free charging, yeah, because they.
The Busy Forks is cheaper than it.
Oh, right. But I think
Um,
it's not as good of a. I don't think it's as good of a car, to me personally.
I'm torn on the BZ. Some of it depends on what you're looking for. The all-wheel drive in the ID4 is disappointing performance-wise. It's not as fast as you might expect it to be for the horsepower figures. It's about the same as the Toyota BZ4X, to be honest.
Right.
If the BZ ever really continues coming. The BZ is much bigger on the inside. It's more comfortable for rear seat passengers in the cargo. That's the main thing for me there. And the BZ doesn't charge that much slower, strangely enough, if you get all-wheel drive. It charges faster if you get front-wheel drive, slower if you get all-wheel drive. But I really want to see what the Equinox EV is like in person.
Right.
If it's on time, and if they can deliver it for the price they're saying they can, I would probably get the Equinox.
That's really the only one that's looking promising in that regard. Anyway, like nothing else.
Yeah.
Nothing else we know that's coming is even
Nero looks
close to
good,
that.
but it's going to be slower charging.
The which one?
The Nero EV.
But the Nero is expensive. I mean, the current one starts at $41,000, and there's no tax credit anymore.
Correct. No tax
So it's
credit.
not cheap, and it's tiny too.
The economy is good, and the infotainment and electronics are easier
They're
to
all good,
use
yeah.
than the Volkswagen one.
Sure. Sure.
We don't know about pricing for the next generation. We'll have to see if we can get some inside information on that from the
I'll have
dealers
to
that
ask
are
my friend who's
already
got
trying
one
to
on
sell
the
them.
dealership. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see exactly how that goes. Stefan here is pointing out that the ID4's charging rate was bumped up to 170 kilowatts, which definitely is an improvement there. It's still not the best, but we'll see how that goes versus some of the competition. The Equinox is supposed to charge faster, depending on the version that you get, because the charge rate is dependent on the battery pack over on the Chevy side. We'll see what the cost structure ends up looking like on the comparison side. But that's probably where I would go. If you want to look at things that are available now, ID4 is probably your best bet for availability. It's been really difficult to get, but it's better than a lot of the competition.
Right. Yeah.
Ioniq 5 and EV6 are available as well, but no tax credit there, of course. No tax credit currently on the ID4, although theoretically the North American made one should get it. When exactly we start seeing those and get some guidance on that, we will know soon. But the ID4 built in Chattanooga should receive the tax credit. This is where things might get a little bit sketchy, because at least unless Volkswagen has changed their mind recently, the plan was that they were going to build ID4s for the North American market, both in the US and in Europe. So you would have to check the VIN number to make sure that you're getting one that was built in the US to get the tax credit.
See, how will that work logistically once, like, say you were back to the normal and you've got a dealership lot full of ID4s.
Got to check the VIN number.
But I guess that's all you could do, right?
Yep, that's all you can do.
Because would the dealership be like, oh, that one's got the mark, or that one's got a tax credit, that one doesn't? Would they say that to you? I mean, I don't know. They probably wouldn't.
We don't know. Yeah, it's unclear. The window sticker will say will show the country of manufacture, so it will say where the final assembly point was. That's the critical part. That's had to be assembled in the U.S. We do not know, and at least there's been no ruling yet as to whether the window sticker will have to say whether or not the tax credit is eligible on that vehicle. That would be the easy thing, but that is not how the legislation was written, so we don't see any particular changes on that. Car manufacturers can add things to the window sticker, but only within certain frameworks for the legislation around Mulroney labels. So whether or not there will be some sort of checkbox or colored icon or something, we have to see. Or it could be that Volkswagen just may decide to shift all production for North America to that one plant simply to make things less confusing.
Yeah.
But this is a problem currently because they're not the only manufacturer that does this with vehicles in the United States. For instance, there are Lexus vehicles that are built both in Japan and in the United States, well, in Canada, technically. Right. So like the Lexus RX is built in Canada and in Japan. So this is not unusual. Let's put it that way. Let's see here. Would anyone recommend buying a 2015 Soul EV? That's a good question. I don't know. You'd have to check the battery health. If the battery is not overly worn, I would say it's not a bad deal, depending on your price tag for it. I had a 2015 Soul EV. Or was it 2016? Either way, I had a Soul EV for a while. The range is definitely short, so that is going to take some getting used to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was weird because remember they were going to bring back that second generation, then they kind of backtracked like Mercedes did with the EQC here.
Yeah,
I don't know what happened there, but I guess we'll never know.
And someone's asking here about the ID Buzz. I'm surprised that you're thinking EV Expedition. Those are two very differently sized vehicles.
Yeah.
The ID Buzz is going to be smaller than a Ford Explorer. So it's going to be sort of Kia Sorento sized, but boxy.
And it's going to be expensive too, from what they're saying. It's going to be kind of like a halo car. Yeah, because I think it's in Germany like $60,000 equivalent, like something like that.
It's probably going to be less than the U.S.,
You
but
think?
still not. It's not going to. I'm sure it's not going to be $40,000. I'm sure it's going to be 50, 55, somewhere around there.
Hopefully,
We obviously
but
don't know
still.
yet because we're not going to get the exact same ID Buzz. It's going to be slightly different for North American tastes.
But we are only getting the long one
Right.
and no cargo one.
Right.
Maybe eventually they'll do that, but yeah.
Unlikely.
Unlikely.
Unless it's going to be built in the U.S. because of the way import duties
True,
are done on
true.
trucks. So no cargo.
No cargo.
No cargo.
Oh wow.
No conversions. No conversions. No cargo. Nothing like that because of the way those rules.
It is
are
actually
written.
a kind of a sad time for the small business owners who need those smaller light commercial vans because they're just dropping like flies. I mean, the only one
Yeah,
left.
they didn't sell.
They didn't sell, but I'm sure somebody needs one. I don't know.
Statistically, not very.
I guess not.
That's the.
I don't know. I guess I
problem.
said I was like, oh,
Yeah.
think of all the people who they didn't buy it. So
Yeah, I thought they were adorable little things. They couldn't get consumers to buy them either in the consumer version. So the Transit Connect consumer version just did not sell well.
It wasn't a great. It wasn't. I remember from what I saw about that car, it was not a great vehicle in terms of just being a people.
I thought they were fine, but it's a very limited use case in America. It's like the thing, if you need to do street parking in Manhattan and you had a family of 6, Transit Connect, really easy option. But that's not where the majority of Americans live. The majority of Americans live in suburbia where they want a Chrysler Pacifica with room for 7 or 8 and their luggage in the back and, the big roof rack and a comfy wide seat, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just saw. I guess you weren't at this because I didn't hear you mention it. But journalists were in Denver to check out the new Mercedes-Benz EQS SUV and some other things in the EQB. But apparently, this surprises me because in pictures it doesn't look like it is. But the EQS SUV is 1 inch longer than a Rivian R1S.
Yep.
on the
Yep.
outside, which boggles my mind because it looks smaller than that. But I guess
It's just very swoopy because
yeah,
aerodynamic vehicles tend to be quite long for their usable space. Like the R1S has more room inside,
sure,
absolutely.
box, yeah.
But in order to have that aerodynamic profile, because they're really targeting range, and that's why I'm kind of intrigued to see. Just talking out loud here. I'm eager to see how the market accepts the inevitable change in vehicle profiles and vehicle dynamics
Hmm.
as things go more towards electrification. Like the BMW i4 and the iX torque steer. They're the
Hmm.
only BMWs that torque steer because up until now, BMW was really iffy on bringing a front-wheel drive based vehicle like the 2 Series Grand Coupe to the US without all-wheel drive because they didn't want that feel. But the
Hmm.
i4 is, I mean, it practically rips the wheel out of your hands depending on what you're doing. And there's no way around that with a single electric motor up front. The only way to change that is to have two electric motors up front, like we see in the Rivian. The Rivian R1S is the only all-wheel drive vehicle, high horsepower all-wheel drive electric vehicle that I have ever tested that does not have torque steer.
And that's just because they can independently
Right. It seems to be
control
because they
that.
can
Yeah,
independently control the motors. There's
yeah,
no mechanical differential because torque steer is one wheel slips, so the power kind of drains off to that wheel because it starts slipping. But you don't get that if you have two motors because there's
right.
this equal amounts of torque sent to them. So tends to feel more like, I guess you'd say, more like a mechanical all-wheel drive system. But I'm just interested to see how that goes. And then obviously, the boxy Mercedes is not going to be there because they're going all electric and they're going all efficient. So we're going to get these sort of suppository shaped EVs.
Except for the EQG, which will look just like the regular G wagon, but that probably won't be efficient at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be efficient at all. Just
No.
like the Lightning's not efficient, just like the Hummer's not efficient,
Yeah,
or the E-Transit van's not efficient. Um, so,
but
uh, yeah,
somebody's gonna want that.
I'm intrigued how that's going to go.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and someone's asking here about the Alpha. I'm curious. What did you think about the Tonale? You saw it there, and of course they had the Dodge Hornet. I'm more excited about the Hornet.
I like the Tonale better, but I understand that it's probably just not going to do well now because of the Hornet. Just because why would you get the Tonale when you have the Hornet right there for
Hmm
10 to 20 grand less for
I
the
like the
same?
look of the Tonale better, but I'm more interested in the Hornet.
I don't like the way the Hornet. I mean, for me, because that's what it was. It was a kind of a last minute decision to do it. From what we've read
Yeah.
and we've heard, it definitely to me looks like they slapped the
Oh,
Dodge
they
Charger
totally did. Yeah,
front end on the Tonale, and I'm like, I don't. You can tell
oh,
now
it
for
totally
the
is.
general public, it's probably fine, but for me, it's like, it doesn't look right to me.
I think for the Dodge shopper for that intended market, the Alpha connection is all plus. There's nothing wrong other than any concerns about reliability, which is not a huge concern honestly for a lot of Dodge shoppers.
Mhm.
Then I think it's all positive because the interior is basically the Alpha's interior. For a whole lot less
Yeah,
cash.
yeah.
It's supposedly more powerful. Somehow they get the more powerful engine tunes, and Alpha stuck with the less powerful engine tunes. I am not clear how that got signed off internally, but it's good for Dodge.
It's really good for Dodge, but I mean, you know what? I guess that's what Dodge needs. They needed a crossover. They needed one that has the sporty pretension and the power that these engines that it's going to offer are probably going to give it. That
Hmm
the plug-in hybrid should be interesting. And I don't know.
Yep. So what's going on with the Chrysler brand? This is an interesting one. We'll see over time. Basically, we know that there is going to be an electric something coming from Chrysler. We're still going to have the minivan, and we'll have the plug-in hybrid minivan for the foreseeable future, and possibly an electric minivan at some point. What the rest of Chrysler looks like, we don't know. I would be intrigued to see a whole bunch of funky French things come over because, of course, now Chrysler is tied up
Right.
in Stellantis with access to Renault's product portfolio.
Hmm.
So I'm strangely intrigued by that because they do have a lot of electric vehicles over there. Whether they would be right for America, who knows? I think it would be entertaining. But yeah, they supposedly have a 10-year lease on life, mainly because Chrysler is what Americans tend to call the entire company. In the industry, most people will call it Stellantis. Every time or other, every now and then we'll trip over FCA, the Fiat Chrysler thing.
Yeah.
But in Americans' mind, it's Chrysler is the whole
Right.
joint with Dodge and Ram and everything else. So I think that's the biggest reason that it's going to live on.
Yeah. It would be hard to
We'll
let that
see.
brand go. It's not like, I mean, like somebody mentioned Saab earlier. Like it doesn't have, it has more of a cachet with the American buyers than anything else under
Yeah,
the
it
umbrella.
didn't. It died a slow death, but it wasn't a spectacular failure in the product
No,
line. The product
no.
line dwindled, but generally speaking, supposedly in customer surveys, the 90s was relatively well regarded for Chrysler. So
Mhm.
the Chrysler New Yorkers and things like that, and LHS and that generation of vehicles actually still has positive vibes going on for some
Mhm.
customers in America. I
Mhm.
would assume anyone under the age of 50, though, doesn't know that they were a thing. So unless they decide to really start investing a lot of money, I'm assuming it's just going to be a slow selling secondary brand. But it does give them the opportunity theoretically to have an all electric portfolio. That's supposedly the plan for Chrysler, is that it will be the only all electric brand in the lineup.
Yeah.
Jeep is going electrified, but that means
Right.
lots of plug-in hybrids. Chrysler's going all electric. Dodge is going performance with whatever. Gosh knows what that's going to all really look like.
Yeah.
Dodge also probably will get a big SUV related to the Grand Wagoneer and Wagoneer. So who
Mhm.
knows?
Alpha will be who knows? They'll just
Yep.
be those two performance models, and that's it. Yeah.
Let's see
Gas.
here. So FCEX is saying financing a mid-trim Palisade. They use all three rows. Afraid you won't be able to afford a three-row EV, even as two-rows EVs are expensive. Yeah, this is a problem. Three-row EVs are a logistical problem too because they're so much bigger, they're so much heavier to use. To have a usable third row, obviously they're going to be less aerodynamic. So when we see a three-row EV that's mainstream, that should be soon. We know the Kia EV6 is, or EV9 rather, and what's Hyundai going to call theirs? Do we know yet?
Ioniq 7.
Ioniq 7. We know those are on the agenda. We probably, or I should say possibly, we possibly may see a production EV9 at the Los Angeles Auto Show this year. It's possible. Not probable, but possible.
Yeah.
Pricing, we just don't know because Kia's pricing, especially on EVs, has really been going up lately. The brand has been really gaining a lot of momentum in the U.S. as far as brand perception and product quality, et cetera. So they've been increasing prices accordingly. Just look at the EV6. So EV9, I would assume, is going to be more of a $60,000 to $80,000 possible EV than EV6 priced. I'm going to go ahead and guess it's not going to be in the same pricing neighborhood as EV6.
I know the last thing I saw was they said it's going to be a 50, probably around 55 starting.
Yeah, wouldn't surprise me. Okay.
Yeah. But that
So,
doesn't, that seems very much, that makes
and no
sense.
tax credit because it's not going to be built in the US,
No, no,
as
no,
far
no.
as we know. At least initially. It most likely will ultimately be built here, but initially it
Not
does
right
not
now.
appear that it will be built here because none of the factories are ready to produce their EGMP platform vehicles.
But look, I mean, people are willing to pay 70,000 for Tellurides because of the markups. I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
people will buy this. So
Yeah. Uh, Here is one interesting one. Christopher Malloy, what's the worst EV nightmare story you've heard? I'm sure everybody's got some really terrible ones. The ones that come to my mind, though, are just inappropriate purchases, I guess.
yeah.
Bunch of years ago, I knew someone that purchased one of the very first generation Nissan Leafs, and he lived in Phoenix, and he calls me up in great distress and says, well, my Leaf, it's dying a slow death. I don't know what to do. It's
You
pretty
bought it used or
new.
bought it new?
I bought it new back in 2013. 2013, 2014, something like that. And Phoenix is the key thing. So he buys an EV with an air-cooled battery in Phoenix, and it was really right at the borderline of his range acceptability. So he was charging it at home fully, 100% charge the battery, then driving it to work. He'd get there almost empty, so he'd plug it in at the office, charge it all the way back to full, drive it home. Then, after about a year, he started not being able to make it from home to the office on a complete charge because the battery had already started aging. So at this point, he starts DC fast charging one direction or the other, or both sometimes. And then that moved on to having to DC fast charge on the way to the office and on the way home. So he's calling in distress. His Leaf only has about 40 miles of range. He's doing all this DC fast charging, etc. And he didn't like my answer when I said, yeah, sounds about right. I mean, you're doing all the things you're not supposed to do with an EV in a climate that's not overly EV friendly.
It's an inhospitable environment, essentially.
Yeah. Ultimately, thankfully, he ended up with the whole, Nissan battery deals and the lawsuits that were going on, et cetera, swirled around, and Nissan ended up replacing his battery with a remanufactured battery, and then he ditched it and got something else. But that's probably the biggest thing is buying EVs that are not appropriate for your use case. If you drive 200 miles a day, there are not very many EVs that are a good use case for you. In an ideal world, you should only charge your EV to 80 to 90%, depending on the electric vehicle. Most of them have that range estimation. And most folks aren't going to want to drive their EV below, say, 15, 20% because they want to have a cushion. So that means that if you have a 200-mile daily drive, you're going to be looking at an EV with a range of 350 plus miles. Realistic actual range of that to meet your needs, which doesn't exist really in the affordable circles. If you are just driving around town, then any EV would be just fine. If you're driving 25, 30 miles a day, anything will be fine. Yeah. And then everything else sorts out in the middle. So you just have to decide if it's going to be a good fit for you. And that's where things go wrong is you've picked one that's incorrect for you. So charging times are a problem, et cetera. You have to do a lot more research. There's no way around it than a gas vehicle. Where are you going to charge it? Make those decisions now. Can you charge it reliably at the office? Can you charge it reliably at home? Is it your only car? That kind of thing.
Right.
Yep. Let's see here. Did you see anything interesting up there?
No, but I think we should maybe do one or two more. I can't click on them, so I can't. Ooh. I can't select them.
You'll have to remember.
I know. I don't know why I'm not logged in.
Let's see here.
Somebody was asking GR Corolla or Civic Type R.
That is an interesting one. We haven't driven the Civic Type R, but right. I really liked that GR Corolla.
He did. He did.
I didn't like the interior though, but the rest of the GR Corolla, just the functionality and the feature set is really good. No all-wheel drive is obviously the big problem in Civic Type R. So it's definitely going to have that front-wheel drive feel. If you like that, and there's nothing wrong with that, then obviously that's a plus.
Yeah.
But I was really surprised by how bonkers Toyota decided to make the GR. I expected it to be kind of boring, and it really wasn't.
Mm-hmm. No, it wasn't. And it doesn't sound as good as my Veloster N, but it pretty much did everything else you expected it to do and a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And you can really feel the difference when you switch it into the rear biased torque distribution. I mean, yeah, you would feel it, but you really can tell the difference in how it behaves, which is cool. I like customization. You can get a different attitude out of your car just by turning the dial, and it's actually a legitimate change. So that was very cool. I liked that, and that would be the cool thing with, and this is sort of like something I can end on here, but I know they're not going to let you do this, but that upcoming Chevy Blazer EV, with the fact that you can get one in front wheel drive, you can get one in rear wheel drive, or you can get one in all wheel drive. I think it'd be cool if you could be able to select between all three on that car too. But that's probably more easy to do in an electric car like that than anything else. But
that mechanical format, there's no way to make it pure rear-wheel drive. They could make it pure front-wheel drive if they wanted to, but then you'd have wheel hop and all sorts of other problems. And that is one reason that we don't see cars with front-wheel drive more than about 300 horsepower. It's pretty rare, because the front suspension just can't take that much power. And depending on the suspension design, you can end up in this situation where there are kind of oscillations with the tires and the grip on the road. So you get wheel hop, which is the wheels literally hopping up and down because of the lack of traction. And that is a bummer, let's just put it that way, in high horsepower front-wheel drive cars. The Type R doesn't tend to do that. Honda has a really, really good front suspension design in that vehicle, but that's part of why we just won't really see much more than the horsepower we're seeing in that vehicle right now. And it's also why vehicles like the CLA 45 or an Audi RS3 are just like totally unusable if the all-wheel drive system is broken and all that power is going to the front tires. It just absolutely cannot handle that. But they are strangely fun to drive with a broken all-wheel drive system. Landon says, are motorized charge ports a gimmick? I see them kind of gimmicky. I'm not the biggest fan of the motorized charge door. I don't know. What do you think about the motorized charge door? You don't care?
One thing, I guess it's one thing you could say would break over time. I don't know.
I'm surprised that not all cars with motorized charge doors have a button on the remote. If I had a button on the remote, I think that might be better. But like the EV6 and the Rivian don't have buttons on them, neither does the Lightning. So you gotta either press a location on the vehicle or press on the charge door. That's a bummer. If you live in somewhere that's icy or snowy, I could see the motorized charge door being an advantage if it's still opened in the snow and ice. See, Grand Highlander. I fully expect the Grand Highlander to be about Telluride sized. I don't think it's going to be big.
You don't think it's going to be that much bigger? Because I feel like that's not big enough to be grand. I feel like it's got to be like, well, I don't know. Because the Sequoia is throwing me off.
A lot smaller.
The Sequoia is not bigger enough on the inside. So I feel like where is the Grand Highlander going to fall in there? I don't know.
I mean, the Telluride and Palisade have almost 8 inches more legroom than Highlander, so it's pretty big. I'm gonna guess somewhere just barely over 200 inches, maybe about 200 inches long. So that would be maybe an exterior stretch of like 8 to 10 inches, something like that.
I just wonder if it's going to be a stretch in terms of how it looks. Will it be a stretched looking Highlander, or will it be more of a unique design? I wonder. We have no idea. We haven't seen that.
I just hope it's not ugly.
I know, because the current Highlander is not ugly. I don't think.
No,
it's fine.
Like Toyota seems to do very attractive crossovers and some very ugly sedans. Like I am not quite clear what went wrong with the Camry, and I know there are people that love the Camry's look, but I am just not a fan.
The current Camry, when it came out,
but the RAV4 looks really good.
The RAV4 looked, when it first, because when they had that concept, it came out like a couple months before they showed the production, and it was basically that concept car in production form, and it looked really good, and it still looks really good. I think a lot of people buy that car because, well, if they bought it before this generation, they bought a lot of those, but now it just has that sort of off-roady look to it just by default, that boxier, more utilitarian look, and I like it, and it still looks fresh to me, especially if you see one with like the two-tone paint options. Those look really like an XSC hybrid. Those look really, really sporty. Like even today, like they still look really good to me. So yeah, their crossover designs are usually pretty solid, especially, and even the Sequoia, like that is the best.
Oh, Sequoia looks great.
It looks fantastic.
I think it looks better than the Tundra. The Tundra's look, the whole, handlebar mustache thing, the, Yosemite Sam thing going on. Not the biggest fan of that, but they fixed it for the Sequoia. It's just a pity that pretty much everything else about the Sequoia is not great.
Not great. Yeah. Well.
Yep. And with that, I guess it is time for us to sign off, everybody. So be sure and hit the subscribe buttons. If you haven't already done so, you'll find all those down there. Reminder that there is the podcast channel where you can see Tim Mosso and I from Watchbox jabbering about totally random things. Let's sign off with a Brian Lightning round. This just should be fun. So you have to answer these as quickly as possible, no thinking. I want you to just spit the answer right out, just as quickly as possible. See how quickly we can go through these. Okay. So turn signals, red or amber?
Amber.
Turbo or supercharger?
Turbo.
DCT or automatic?
DCT.
Coupe or convertible?
Convertible.
Big Mac or sourdough jack?
Sourdough jack.
Hyundai or Kia?
Ooh, Hyundai.
Ford or Chevy?
Ford.
Ninja or sumo wrestler?
Ninja.
Taco or meatball?
Meatball.
V8 or V12?
V8.
Ooh, didn't expect that one. Anyway, with that, we will sign off and see all of you guys next time. Bye.
Have a great weekend.